episode 54 of Grace and Steel. I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.
This show, our topic is the exhausted elite. In it, we'll view Hillary Clinton's tired campaign, propped up by her ineffectual husband, now supported by a fading Bush clan, as a symptom of a greater global malaise amongst our leaders, both political and economic. We see a 1%, a ruling elite, that is simply out of ideas. They really haven't a clue how to keep our societies productive, contented, and stable for the common weal. The premise for this podcast comes from thoughts developed by my co-host as he addressed an informal gathering of like-minded people in his area a few days back. First of all, Kevin, by way of introduction, perhaps you could give our listeners some idea of what you spoke to these folks about.
I gave a potted survey of Western political history since 1945. And I talked about how politics was removed from the West in 1945 because politics were thought to be something that we couldn't afford because politics led to disaster, as shown by the First and Second World Wars and all the horror therein. I also spoke about, and this is more relevant to what we're going to speak about tonight, the weakness of the elite.
Mm-hmm.
The elite is effete, exhausted.
Yeah.
This is my contention.
Okay.
That I think that there are big changes coming, biggest being the return of politics, as we see with the rise of Donald Trump. And I think that it's going to be easier, bring about major changes than a lot of people think. Because, as I say, the elite is exhausted. And talking about an exhausted elite, let's talk about Hillary Clinton.
Well, she seems to be embody the exhaustion of the elite, I guess. In a way, she's a walking metaphor.
She is a walking metaphor, and sometimes a barely walking metaphor.
Oh, yeah, stumbling metaphor. Okay.
Stumbling metaphor.
Okay.
This is a woman who was rejected by the Democratic Party in 2008. In favor of Barack Obama, who was a little-known one-term senator. And it was supposed to be her turn in 2008. It was supposed to be her turn in 2016. Of course, there are no turns in politics. Politics ain't beanbag, as they say. But apart from the fact that she was an odd choice for the inevitable, she simply not up to it, that she is corrupt, manifestly corrupt, and she has demonstrated her incompetence while Secretary of State. She is the candidate of the 1%. That much is clear.
Yeah, without a doubt there.
But, I don't know, compared to, say, Europe, here in North America, the 1% has come up with a candidate who brings disrepute on the 1%. Because of her personality, because of her record, and because she doesn't have anything to offer.
Well, that's it. Platform. What's she campaigning on? I'm not quite sure based on what I've seen. Now, I haven't delved into her website and pulled up the platform and all that stuff, but she's not talking about much other than, Donald Trump is a bad guy and we all have to come together.
Stronger together.
Yeah. Well, okay, we're stronger together. Okay. I guess that means diversity. I guess that's what she's campaigning on, is it?
Doesn't really mean anything. It reminds me of the campaign, Dreyfus's campaign slogan on Veep, change with continuity, right?
Okay.
Stronger Together was deliberately crafted at God knows what expense in order to be a message which seems profound, but actually commits the candidate to nothing.
Yes. Okay. So she's intellectually exhausted, I would say. They are not the party that is presenting any change because they, of course, have the incumbent presidency. However, that still doesn't mean she can't craft a bunch of policies. And, I haven't heard her roll out a lot of policy speeches. Have I missed anything there? I don't think so.
Well, I've heard her talk, and apparently if she becomes president, then everyone's going to get a good job.
Well, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I don't know why politicians haven't thought of this before.
So maybe they're not exhausted. Maybe they've got a clever plan, giving everybody a good job.
How would she attempt to accomplish this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have the 1% running things. We have the bankers running things. We have the Federal Reserve helicoptering money to the banks.
Mm-hmm.
And this money is not trickling down into the economy. The volatility of money has fallen tremendously. The economy is in a kind of stasis, a regressive stasis. And there is seemingly no way out of this.
Mm-hmm.
That everything that the Federal Reserve has attempted since 2008 has resulted in a situation whereby, they can point to GDP growing, not much, and GDP is only growing because they have fiddled the books such that inflation doesn't exist.
Right, and they are counting government spending as
Of course, yeah,
which
of
has
course, of course.
skyrocketed lately. Right. So.
Yeah, I mean you will remember a generation ago there was considerable concern among Western governments about deficits. Remember that?
Yeah, that was at least in my area of the world, Alberta, that was as oil prices were down. I think they were around $12 a barrel, and we were in a prolonged recession here in oil country. But around the world, there was a lack of money, ready money. I know that the Canadian government started making cuts around the time of Chrétien, wasn't it? So
That's correct.
93, somewhere in there. So
This feeling, it began in Alberta and it swept through Canada that governments were spending too much money, and the Canadian government dealt with the problem by cutting all these subventions to the provinces,
yeah.
which solved the federal problem but put the provinces in a state of crisis.
Yeah.
Now, back then, a generation ago, there was a belief that deficits could only be brought so high. That was the old belief. We don't believe in that anymore. Now we believe that deficits can be as high as we like, for as long as we like, because, we owe the money to ourselves. Now, you'll recall that a couple of months ago, Donald Trump was suggesting that this money that we owe, we're not going to pay it back. And he's right about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not possible for Western governments to pay back the money that they owe.
So what
are they going to do? What are they going to do about it? Well, I suppose they could default, or what's more likely, they simply ruin their currencies.
Well, those who hold the debt, I guess they get power in exchange for not getting paid back. Is that the trick? What do they get at?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a suicide pact.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that, if we don't play ball with China, they're going to retaliate against us by doing what? By stop selling us their cheap crap. That's what the Chinese economy is based on. They're stuck in this, the same way that we are stuck in this.
Yeah.
Debt seems to be the solution to all our problems. Personal debt, as Adam Curtis has pointed out, that the way we live now is that, yeah, sure, you can have the things that your father and your grandfather had. Well, how's that possible? When we don't have the jobs that they had, the banks will loan you the money. So personal debt, especially in Canada, is at an all-time high. And we have this new phenomenon, which is only about a decade old, dealing with the problem of young people graduating from university and where are the jobs for them? How about we just keep them in school longer? How about everyone has to go to some sort of post-secondary institution for 4 to 6 years?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a lot of people who don't want to go to school, but school has been made more palatable to them 2 ways. One, by selling them the lie that this is going to result in better jobs. And second, by allowing them to live as if they were working, because you will know that it is the style for college and university students now to act as if they're well off when they're not well off, when they are digging themselves tremendously into debt. But apparently they'll have 4 to 6 happy years before they have to re-enter the world and reality kicks in.
The idea, though, is some kind of slow decline that we're in. And, there's some people who would, I suppose, not argue aloud, but would think, well, this is working for now. Let's keep it going. I mean,
it's not working for now. I mean, we see in the United States, the unemployment rate has fallen. The unemployment rate has fallen because of people who've left the workforce. The number of people who are out of the workforce is over 100. I believe it's close to 100 million people now.
Mm-hmm.
You have this exploding numbers of people on Social Security, federal insurance, disability, etc. There is nothing that is being advanced to deal with this problem of borrowing more and more money for less and less return. What does Hillary Clinton have to offer in a way of foreign policy? Well, apparently America is not fighting enough wars. And Russia. We want to get into a war with Russia. I believe we mentioned this on a previous podcast, that Hillary Clinton seems to be unsure about whether the Cold War ended and about us winning. Oh, because the Republicans have always been deeply suspicious of Russia, and I believe she meant the Soviet Union. But now we've gone from a situation where the neocons were all laughing at Russia, ha, 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 you're all dying of disease and despair, and the Russian race is literally dying out to, oh my God, they're the biggest threat in the world.
Yeah, they really turned that one around. But
they're interfering in Ukraine. God forbid that Russia should have interests in Ukraine. It's as absurd as the idea of the United States having interests in Mexico or Canada.
Indeed, yeah, but they're not advocating for a Cold War. They're looking for a hot war. Aren't they looking for destruction? Because destruction will feed the economy? In other words, we don't have any peaceful ideas, but we have
no. I don't think that they've thought this through at all.
Okay.
I mean, we are putting through NATO troops on the Russian border. We're ringing Russia with hostile forces, and the idea that this is going to bring Putin to heel. That he's simply going to do everything we tell him to. Well, I mean, what they want him to do is to go away and be replaced by some stooge of the West. That's what they got in the Ukraine. They had a coup d'etat that eliminated the Russian-friendly government and brought in a government unfriendly to Russia. In terms of the Islamic threat, oh, well, there's going to be the war on terror, which apparently is going to last unto infinity. And the question of, well, what are the benefits of this war on terror? How did that work out, for instance, in Iraq and Afghanistan? Well, are those countries any better than they were? How did this work out in Libya, removing Gaddafi? Well, Europe got flooded with refugees, as Gaddafi warned. That Europe is being flooded by refugees from Africa, by Asia, and of course the United States is very much in favor of this for reasons that I don't know whether they have any reasons. I mean, this is one of the symptoms of exhaustion, that people continue to do things that don't make any sense. And I don't really believe that it's a question of them necessarily being malevolent. It's just that they don't know any better. That's all they know how to do.
Well, I guess they're looking for ways to, I guess, spice it up. I mean, one of the things that I was, in thinking about this idea of the exhausted elite, it appears that people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, their idea is space. Let's go to space. Okay.
Oh, and self-driving cars.
Yeah, okay. Self-driving cars and space. Okay. That's creative, but, how is that going to work on the ground?
I don't see what the benefits there are. I mean, the costs, we have regions of the earth which are underexploited, if you will, because of the enormous costs involved. For instance, the Canadian Arctic. You may have read one of dozens or hundreds of stories which have been printed in the last decade about the untold mineral wealth of the Arctic, right?
I've read that all my life, actually. Mackenzie Valley
Okay.
Pipeline on forward.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I recall reading a few years ago that in Nunavut, which is one of the 3 territories of the Canadian Arctic, there's something like 24 miles of paved roads, or maybe just roads, in the whole place. And Nunavut is I don't know, it's about the size of Europe or half of Europe. It's enormous, right?
Right.
And so it's unlikely, unless we get very, very, very much richer, that much is going to be done in the Arctic. And when we're talking about going into space, I just see this as, Steve Saylor says, hey, look, a squirrel. Oh, wow, we're going into space. That gives us reason to be hopeful. They seem to be forgetting that the reason that America made the pledge to bring a man to the moon by 1970, it was a military reason. That the Soviets had taken the lead in space exploration, and the idea was, as Tom Wolfe reported in his book, The Right Stuff, quoting Lyndon Johnson, that the Russians could be on the moon lobbing missiles at us like a little boy on a highway overpass tossing rocks at cars.
That's an odd image.
No, and this business of self-driving cars. Oh, wow, we're going to automate everything. We're already talking about all the truck drivers being put out of work, right?
Yeah, sure.
All the delivery men being put out of work. And, McDonald's is going to be automated. And we're heading towards the dream. And the dream is that people will never have to interact with another human again.
That's not my dream.
Well, how many jobs will be left for anyone in this scenario is an interesting question.
Lots of leisure time. But
I mean, we joke about watching old movies, for instance, with elevator operators.
Mm-hmm.
Well, elevator operators were an example, I suppose, of noblesse oblige, also of people wanting human contact. That, as it turned out, there was no reason for the position of elevator operator to exist, but it gave people the opportunity to put on a uniform and take home a salary.
Well, yeah, there's a bit of the doorman aspect of it as well, you know.
It also played to the belief, which I'll have to remind younger listeners, this actually was a belief, and it was a majority belief for several decades after the Second World War, that there was a place in society for everyone. Can you imagine that?
Odd. Well, I wanted to bring up this one idea that I see as a symptom of exhaustion. It's not something I've seen necessarily down in the States. It's something we've joked about here. And this was the idea that they've come up with this thought that we're creating some kind of innovation economy. And that's so...
Paul Wells.
Well, it's just Paul Wells has used it a lot.
Captain Innovation.
Yeah, he's not the only one that's used it. You know, I've seen other people. I don't know if they're riffing off of him or it's become a common term, but I mean, it's this vague idea that we're moving away now from the carbon economy into this innovation economy. And it's so vague and unspecific that I have a feeling they don't really know what they're talking about. I recall, and nobody talks about this nowadays, but back at the time of Obama's first campaign, 2007 presidential campaign, everybody was talking about green jobs. It was all about green jobs. That was the future, right? We're all going to get into this green economy and it's going to create all these jobs. And that didn't happen. So,
yeah, AKA let them eat solar panels.
Well, that seemed to be where it died. That was the altar it died on. But I mean, it was there was this thing I remember researching it called the Apollo Project. It was headed by Robert Redford, no less. He was one of the guys on the board of directors. And, you know, they were all about finding clean energy for the green economy. And this is what was going to fuel the future. And that seems to have all disappeared. And I'm thinking, well, maybe that's what this innovation economy is supposed to be. It's a substitute for the green jobs.
Well, first of all, we're not moving away from the carbon economy. We are utterly dependent on the carbon economy.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that the carbon economy is going to be shaken down in order to make mandatory investments in new, unproved technology. Well, maybe that could have been tried before 2007. We're in no position to shake down the carbon economy now, although your government in Alberta seems to be willing to have a go at it, and the government of Ontario and the federal government of Canada, apparently.
Right, yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. I haven't seen much of it in the United States, but the idea is that we've got this new thing called the innovation economy, which, like I said, it sounds... Go ahead.
This is puerile, okay?
Right.
The economy was utterly transformed by the development of the automobile. And who developed the automobile? Well, tinkerers developed the automobile. There was no government plan to turn our lives upside down by inventing a new mode of transportation. It happened. In the same way that the personal computer has turned our lives upside down. Who came up with the personal computer? Tinkerers in their garages came up with it. There's the famous story that Steve Jobs took the Apple computer to Hewlett-Packard, where he had an in, and they said something like, well, yes, we've heard about this before. We've actually done a study that shows that there are only 6 people in the entire United States that would have use for such a device. Well, this device made its own uses. And how these things are going to play out is unknown. I mean, if you had made predictions, what the Altair came out, in 1975, 1976, and it was a huge hit, right? They sold something like 250,000 out of them. What you sent money away for a kit, right, of parts, which you put together to build a box that didn't do anything. And then, look, we've written code so that we can make the lights move in a certain pattern, or we can use radio static to control noise, right? This excited the tinkerers at the beginning. If anyone had made predictions that this new technology or this new use of technology was going to turn society and the economy upside down, well, they would have been laughed out of the room or laughed out of society because it just seemed absolutely absurd. The idea that you have people, younger people more than older people, but a lot of older people who appear to be captives of a rectangular disc, which they hold at crotch level and stare down at all the time. I mean, if you'd put this in a science fiction novel in 1975, well, no, come on. You'll have to come up with something better than that.
Right, yeah, not very much visual excitement there.
My point is that when you talk about the innovation economy in the way that Paul Wells does, Paul Wells of the Toronto Star, it's based on this idea that it's simply a question of supply, that we take this fuel, or raw material, and we dump it in one end of a tube, right? And then it gets processed through the tube, and it comes out as shiny new devices and technologies which transform our world for the better and make everyone richer and happier. That's not how development works.
Yeah, but I mean, we are demanding answers from our elite. You are the leaders. You have noblesse oblige. So you must have answers for us, right? We can't. You can't tell me that you're just going to wait for the tinkerers in the garages of the nation to solve all our problems. I demand answers and action from you, the politicians.
They don't have any answers.
Well,
I mean, they point to...
I know, but we demand them.
They point to the Dow Jones, and they point to the Standard & Poor 500. They point to quarterly GDP growth, and what they're saying is, see, the economy's doing pretty well. It's going to get better, but it's doing pretty well now. And if you were to say, well, I've asked around family and friends, and they're telling me the economy's not doing so well at all, that people are just barely hanging on, that we have all of these people who will not retire from their jobs because they're afraid of poverty or destitution, of losing their homes. And our leaders say, did I mention to you the Dow Jones and the latest quarterly GDP reports? This is how divorced they've become from reality. And of course, these figures are faked. They're faked in order to present the only good news that can be presented.
Right. Well, that goes to my point that I was making earlier. We say, well, it ain't ideal, but it's the best that we got, and the alternative is anarchy. And this collapse that you talk about, well, we certainly don't want a collapse. So perhaps we should just keep on watching that Dow Jones go through the ceiling. I think it's at over 18,000 now,
Yeah, there's also the commodity super cycle. Have you heard of this?
No, actually. I've heard of commodities and super cycles, but not a commodity.
Since 2008, the economic elite has held to the notion that we are going to have Western growth until the foreseeable future, substantial Western growth because of the commodity super cycle, which is based on development, substantial development in India, Brazil, and in particular China. And China is just growing like gangbusters. Oh man, 10% a year. And well, how long can you get an economy to grow by 10% a year? If you're starting from nothing, yeah, it's not so hard. But the more developed an economy becomes, 10% a year begins to seem like a fairy tale number. And we saw what happened with China, that this didn't get all that much comment in the West. And I think for the reason that we were frightened. That you must have seen those pictures in the Daily Mail of these phantom cities
those are great.
that China has built for populations of 1 million that have, the housing and infrastructure, and they're empty.
Yeah, really. They could be used for movie sets, for heaven's sakes.
This is Keynesian priming the pump gone mad. Now, another question that the experts don't really want to get into is, how do we know how well the Chinese economy is doing? They're not exactly known for their openness. It's still a closed society. They say that growth is this much, but how do we know what it really is? Now, despite their best efforts, it would appear that Chinese economic growth has fallen significantly, or the rate of growth has fallen significantly in recent years, with the result that commodities just took a kicking, for the last 4 or 5 years. So it would appear that the super cycle not looking too good.
So we're looking at another 1999 scenario, Asian meltdown, this time China, or what?
Well, we don't want to think about that. I mean, if China suffers a significant economic reverse, we are all in big, big trouble.
Okay. But no, I mean, are the Chinese elite exhausted as well? I mean,
well, going back to the theme of exhaustedness, as I mentioned, it's often associated with a kind of childishness. And one aspect of this childishness is that, someone's going to invent something. A cold, you mean like cold fusion? Something like that.
Well, that's the innovation economy, isn't it?
Some egghead somewhere is going to come up with some idea which is going to save us all,
The hover bike. Yeah. I've been waiting for that for a long time. Even before The Simpsons.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you look at the computer revolution, it would seem that the gains of the personal computer revolution were fully realized some time ago. That the fact that smartphones are smarter than ever, and that smartphones can do many, many things that they couldn't do previously, that maybe you don't need a desktop or a laptop at all anymore. How does that advance productivity? Because as you see, the smartphone is, it's really mostly a toy.
I see people checking their messages. I mean, it's communication gone mad, really. People are constantly in contact with other people and checking their messages, and this has become an obsession for some, a necessity for others. I mean, they used to.
So apparently, it's evidence that they're still alive.
I guess.
I mean, this, as George Costanza famously said, how many emergencies are going on in the world at any one time? 3, 4? Oh no, I got to keep checking my messages. What are you expecting to hear? Has Alison Brie invited you to dinner, but you didn't get back to her fast enough, so now you lost your chance? Is that what people are expecting?
Oh man, I am. But no, it's this is the exhausted, I guess, middle class. But the exhausted elite. I mean,
No. Let's look at something a little different. The elite now is, and you can read about this in Burnham's book, The Machiavellians, when he talks about the iron law of oligarchy, Pareto and Michel's, that this is a self-selecting class. If you look at politicians, increasingly, they have no experience in anything other than politics. What good are they outside of politics? What possible use do they have? Oh, well, many of them go on to upstanding careers as what? PR guys?
Advisors.
Yeah, selling influence, peddling influence. This is parasitical activity.
Not productive at all. Yeah, I understand.
No, not productive at all.
They weren't productive going into politics. And
there's an argument to be made that the entire legal profession is, or the bulk of it is parasitical. But on the other hand, engaging in law, as many politicians used to be engaged in before they got into politics, it can equip you with a knowledge of people and human behavior and human institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Increasingly, our politicians get involved in politics when they are in university. Straight out of university, they get on somebody's staff, and then they look for an opening. What happens is that they work as a staffer, and then that staffer moves, say, from the House of Representatives to the Senate or becomes a governor, and that leaves open a spot. So then the staffer fills that spot. And you see this leapfrogging all the way up to the top. Well, what has Hillary Clinton ever done in her life except politics?
Right. Okay. So promoted from within.
I want to make clear just how pervasive this is.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of weeks ago on Twitter, I mentioned, I didn't know this until recently, that Anthony Weiner, who has been in the news again lately, that straight out of college, he went to work as a staffer for Chuck Schumer. And Chuck Schumer was first elected office, I believe, at the age of 26, and he has never left. And Weiner first got into politics at the age of 22, never left. Stephen Harper, no experience outside politics. Ronna Ambrose, the leader of the Conservative Party, no experience outside politics. Wasserman Schultz, entirely politics. It just goes on and on and on. That these people are, the political class is now largely, overwhelmingly, a class of professional parasites.
Yeah.
And this feeds the exhaustion, as it were, because the only people that they talk to are people who are exactly like them, and they all believe the same things.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we can rag about the exhausted politicians, but I think it's the exhausted economic class that is the greater danger. I'm thinking about this Jack Ma guy, Alibaba, talking about globalism. We can't end globalism because when trade ends, wars start. This is, immigration. It's immigration or trade. These are the two big issues in the election down in the United States. So I think that the exhaustion amongst the economic class, the Goldman Sachs class, that's the dangerous exhaustion. The politicians, they just sort of reflect this in a way. The professional politician, well, I mean, that is a modern plague, but isn't this ennui amongst the upper classes? Isn't that the 1%? Isn't that a greater danger?
Well, I mean, part of it is that what is it that business is known for now? It seems to be known not for producing things, but for shifting money around, or for phantom ideas. vaporware.
Hmm.
I mean, what is it that Facebook does that is so important to the economy to justify its worth?
It makes us
To give you one
stronger
example.
together.
What exactly does Alibaba do that it is so valuable? 200 market value of, as of September 2014, $231 billion.
Hmm. Well, of course, he's in trade. I mean, that's the thing that he's trading in, is trade. Alibaba is basically Kijiji for the international shipping set, at least last time I was on it back in 2009, when I was researching snowmobiles of all things. But that's another story. It is at least trade, but I mean, what he's saying is, we can't reverse course here. That's what Jack Ma is saying. We can't reverse course. We can't change what we're doing now. Otherwise, we're going to blow the whole place up.
Otherwise, he would be worth very much less than he's worth now.
Well, that's the way I read it. But I mean, what he's saying is, trade, where there's no trade, there's war. As if, anti-globalism is anti-trade, but...
There's all sorts of trade that goes on.
Yeah, I know.
The idea that, it's best to do trade with China. No, why is it better to do China than to, here in BC, to do trade with Alberta or Washington State? That is an absurd argument on its face.
Well, except if
This
you look
idea
at the interprovincial trade barriers, it seems to be much easier to do trade with China than with our neighbors.
To a certain
That's
extent.
a Canadian joke, by the way, folks.
Yeah, to a certain extent. But let's look at the question of utility. Globalism is a doctrine which has held the world in its sway for 25 years at best. It's possible to examine the consequences of globalism, one of which is, hollowing out of manufacturing in North America.
Mm-hmm.
And, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, the way that the globalists argue is that it's scientific in some way. It's historically inevitable in the same way that communism was said to be historically inevitable. And whenever you see an argument like that, you know that it's suspicious and almost certainly false. No, we don't have to be globalists. We don't have to do anything we don't want to do. Oh, yeah, all these people lose their jobs, but items that you buy are cheaper. Well, Henry Ford famously raised the salaries of his workers. For one reason, is that they'd have the money to buy his cars.
Mm-hmm.
It's no good telling people that, you can buy some trinket for not very much money if you don't have any money.
Understood. Yeah. Well, this is quantitative easing, isn't it? This is the credit bubble. Hey, you can have it if you borrow it, and we'll lend it.
Well, no, I mean, we haven't mentioned this before, that, again, this is the story of the century, as far as I can see, that capitalism, as it has been traditionally understood, has been abolished.
Mm.
Capitalism means that people save their money, and they loan it at interest, which is called usury, to banks, who then loan it at higher interest to businesses which are starting out or expanding. Well, one of the problems with that is sometimes people don't have the money to loan to the banks. So the banks can't loan to the businesses, and there are credit shortages. There is also the business cycle, which refers to an excess of commodity, which leads to recessions. And at the time of the e-bubble, roughly 2000, the bright sparks led by Alan Greenspan decided we didn't need a business cycle anymore, that credit could take care of this. And in order to make it easier for people to get a hold of this credit, we were going to slash interest rates down to zero. And now we're looking at going into negative territory. Mm-hmm. Now, one result of this is that our leaders told us to be responsible and to save money for our retirement. James Kunstler pointed out a couple of weeks ago that no one seems to be in any hurry to issue any apologies to the people who did what they were told and saved money for their retirement. Mm. Because these people are getting screwed massively. And hey, the world's moved on. You know, hey, don't expect any, apologies from us.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? It's the future.
Don't save for your retirement. Now you can kill yourself, and we'll help you with assisted suicide laws.
Capitalism is better, the theorists tell us, than socialism, communism, other forms, because it enables prices, true prices, to be detected.
Mm-hmm.
If credit is going to be rained down on everyone, it becomes impossible to determine true prices.
Yeah, and there's still excessive commodity problems, isn't there? I mean, those still exist. You talked about a city built for 1 million people that nobody lives in. That looks like an excessive commodity there. Is that where our excess is going? Or, is that how we're
Well, no,
spilling
there's
it out?
other excesses in that these attempts to force businesses to institute mark-to-market accounting procedures where actually you have to say what your business is worth now.
Mm-hmm.
So that shareholders or potential shareholders, investors can make informed decisions. All this stuff about goodwill and the like that. Nah. We want a no bullshit assessment of what your company is worth. And they howled and in effect said, if we had to tell the truth, then no one would want to buy our stocks.
Yeah, the whole thing collapses.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we have an entire economy running on bullshit. Okay.
I mean, no, you look at the, historic highs in the equity markets and you ask yourself this question, are these specific companies doing so well? Is the economy as a whole doing so well? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one of the ways that the companies engineer these increases in stock prices is by slashing the workforce and slashing R&D,
Mm-hmm.
which is not very good for innovation.
Right. Well, let's.
But
Yeah.
presumably, sorry to interrupt, presumably, well, the government will step in with the innovation. No, look, we know how this works. You saw this with Solyndra and other similar scams with Obama, that the money goes to politically protected people who put it in their pockets.
Yeah, or turn around and buy ambassadorships with it or something to that effect. Yeah, good stuff like that. Well, okay, since this show we're mandated to solve all the world's problems in an hour.
No, we haven't touched on. I just want to mention something else. Okay,
Mm.
you look at the exhaustion of the elite. Paul Gottfried wrote a book about this. That after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact countries, socialism was finished. And so presumably this would have put the left in a terrible position because the left was allied to socialism, mixed economy, government intervention in the economy. What the left did was they stepped up and said, hey, we have this new thing, and it's called multiculturalism, aka diversity, aka anti-sexism, racism, homophobia, whatever, and identity politics. This is what we're all about now. And so you should let us continue to run things, and that's what happened. Now, we're going to consider ourselves solely by our differences, then it seems to me that this is going to lead to a situation of very low trust. Because, hey, listen to me speak. Why should we listen to you speak? Because I am a member of this group. Oh, well, I'm a member of this group and that group. No, I have three aces here, and you only have two. Whereas, oh, my lesbianism trumps your being black. No. Black trumps everything. Well, no, I'm a Muslim. And therefore, what I say is more important than anything you have to say. This leads to a war of all against all, and yet our elite continues to double down on this, which has had all sorts of malign effects, not the least of which is a millennial generation that seems to be terrified of opposing opinion.
Or human interaction, even, actually.
Yeah, or human interaction. Yes, that's a problem with human interaction, particularly random human interaction, is that you are going to run into people who are different from you. No, someone, writing Trump build the wall in chalk and then, drawing a picture of a wall in chalk and this leading to the police being called and classes shut down. And oh my God, we have support groups for all these people.
Hmm.
And oh yeah, of course, we need trannies in the armed forces. Why? These people are mentally ill, severely mentally ill. But I
You say
mean,
like that's a bad thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm old school that way. But they continue to double down on the idea of identity politics. People who are obsessed with themselves are people who are not likely to be much use in a society, although increasingly the elite seems to be allied to the notion that, as Margaret Thatcher said, there's no such thing as society. There's just, independent units, atoms seeking to maximize their own utility. That we're all in this together. Hey, you speak too soon. What do you mean us? And what do you mean together?
Hmm.
You can't have societies, you can't have communities, you can't have nations on that basis. Now, nations, do we want nations? I don't know. Justin Trudeau says that Canada is going to be a post-national country. Now, I just have to say for our foreign listeners that there's a tendency to think that because Justin Trudeau is the Prime Minister of Canada, or as they have taken to calling out on NPC, Tumblr the country,
Thanks a lot. That's the
that
thanks we get, eh?
that that he can't be an idiot. Well, he is an idiot.
Mm.
This is a man who was asked one of these stupid joke, VHS questions. Which one of your Baltics is the favorite? This was late last year.
Yeah.
And he said, that's not a thing.
That was the
In
best.
other words, there's no such thing as the Baltics. Well, 6 months later, Canada announced that it was sending troops to the Baltics in order to encircle Russia.
In circle, yeah. We
Justin
sent 200,
Trudeau.
238 or something like that, so I don't think we were
Well,
actually.
yeah, but it's the action that's
Yeah.
important, you know.
Hmm.
And this is a man who has never had a serious thought in his life. He's a trustafarian. He skipped around being a substitute teacher, a couple of
Yeah.
schools, Vancouver, was a snowboard instructor or something like
Yeah.
that. And then he made a speech at his father's funeral, and everyone waited around until he was inevitably crowned prime minister. That's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, and
I mean, I'm
you'd
barely
actually.
exaggerating
Yeah, I
here.
know, but you said I think prior to this recording that he himself is a symptom of the exhausted elite, just like Hillary Clinton is. He's a man without ideas.
He's a man without ideas. And see, Hillary Clinton, he's the opposite of Hillary Clinton in the sense that she has put herself forward since forever, saying, me, 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 me. I deserve to run the show. I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and people, damn it, they like me. Whereas Justin Trudeau, I think this guy would have been happy to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But after a succession of disastrous liberal leaders, the Liberal Party decided this guy had the cue, as they say in the entertainment business, that people recognize the name, the brand name,
Hmm.
that he was this young, vital, said to be handsome. Although to me, he always looks like someone who's not sure where he left his keys. And what happened in this case was that he was tipped for the top. Despite the fact that he had done nothing in his life and he'd given no evidence of education or even interest, he had infamously said that he didn't read the news because he figured that if anything important happened in the world, someone would tell him about it. He was given a parliamentary seat. And then he was anointed prime minister because the people who run this country came to the conclusion that one more disastrous Liberal Party leader would finish off the party. And since we own this party, which has ruled Canada for most of its existence, we can't have that happen. You'd think, hey, these people would be happy with the NDP because the NDP believes pretty much what the Liberal Party believes. The problem with that is that these people, certain, businessmen, deep state people, they don't own the NDP. So there's too much randomness, too much variability involved there. And Justin Trudeau was anointed leader of the Liberal Party. And then he was elected prime minister with 39% of the popular vote. I'm not going to complain about that. That's rather typical in Canada. I believe that Chrétien won a majority government with something like 37% of the popular vote.
Yeah, something like that, 33.
I mean, that's how it works in this
Yeah.
country.
But
since that time, we've had this extraordinary situation where the media is telling us that Trudeau was given this extraordinary mandate, and thus we must do whatever he wants. And that the Conservative Party, they were just devastated. They were destroyed in the last election. Well, they were reduced to 99 seats and something like 31% of the vote. That's hardly being destroyed. I just point out that Stephen Harper had been prime minister for 9 years, and the way that it works in democracies is that people get sick of familiar faces. I'm not arguing that that's entirely the reason why he lost, but it's perfectly understandable why he would lose. And yet, oh no, Justin Trudeau gets to do whatever he wants, and the Liberals get to change Canada in any way they want because Justin Trudeau was given this mandate in 2015 the same way that his father was in 1968, and in both cases it's nonsense. There's no such mandate, and Justin Trudeau gives every sign of being a high-functioning retard.
True enough, but they basically have taken this as carte blanche to do whatever they think is necessary to keep the thing going, right? So, okay, we have lots of latitude now. As long as we've got the shirtless man up there keeping everybody happy, we'll just do whatever we need to do to make this country work.
Well, I mean, there's a change in the elite from the past. There's a famous story of how J.P. Morgan locked a bunch of financiers in a room, I believe, to end the panic of 1907. And they were not to be let out of the room until they ponied up enough money to ease America out of the crisis. The way that the 1% works is that they're in it entirely for themselves. I mean, if you are a billionaire, you have enough money to buy a private army, if you like, that you don't really have to worry very much. That if the country goes to hell, well, how's that going to affect you? I mean, it's difficult for people to imagine how much money $1 billion is and what can be done with $1 billion. But we have the rule by billionaires now, and it's decided that they must get richer and richer because this indicates that the system works. Well, it certainly works for them, but they have no investment in the future. I mentioned, the slashing of R&D and the slashing of the workforce. And of course, this is a big problem with democracy itself. I'm not going to get into a discussion of democracy versus monarchy, but if you look at a monarchy, the family which runs the country is not going to loot the country because essentially it owns the country already and wants to pass that on to the sons and daughters. I've mentioned this with regard to Obama before, that Obama and all Democratic leaders is in the situation, like in the joke, where a bear has showed up at a camp and there's two men in a tent, and one of them is swiftly lacing up his boots, and his friend says, "What are you doing? You can't outrun a bear." And he says, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you." That if the United States economy collapses one day after he leaves office in January 2017, the tendency will be to blame the incoming president. In the same way that Reagan was blamed for the recession of his first term, which is not his fault. This goes, all the way back to, Martin Van Buren, that, hey, it's not my fault because it didn't happen under my watch. And so they have a vested interest in not making any difficult decisions because difficult decisions frequently involve pain, immediate pain, short-term pain for long-term gain. Well, in democracies, what you see is the pain happens through black swans because we can't manage change. We can't manage decline or reformation because that would involve politicians saying, we've decided to make decisions which are actually going to hurt people. They cannot say that.
Yeah, so it all happens, though, in the first 2 years, right, of anybody's term. All the decisions are made then.
Yeah, I had a friend. I used to work with this fellow who became a very senior functionary of Gordon Campbell's government. And I think it was 18 months that Gordon Campbell had been in power. And he told me, we're pretty much coming to the end of the time that we can do anything that we want to do, because all the rest of the time is going to be spent trying to be reelected. And so we can't do anything which is going to lead to unforeseen consequences, or a bunch of people shaking their fists, or people saying, oh, these various indices have gone down since you made those changes. And they could say, no, 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 they're going to go up again. No, no, too late. We don't have any long-term vision. It's not possible to have any long-term vision. And by long-term vision, I think 2 to 3 years now counts as long-term vision.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I want to wrap this up by asking this, since we are in the middle of this, or heading towards the American presidential election. How is the revitalization of politics going to energize the exhausted elite, or will it just exhaust them further?
They have to go.
Mm-hmm.
No, they have to be replaced. This is the great insight of James Burnham, that political change happens not because people have different ideas and these ideas take hold. They happen because one elite is replaced by another. Now, what you need for that to happen is an alternative elite, which is waiting in the wings. To give you an example, when the laissez-faire government of the Republicans of the 1920s was, I don't want to get into this historically, but it was seen to lead to the crash of 1929 and the Great Depression. There was an alternative elite there to staff the Roosevelt White House, to transform the country, to bring in the New Deal and, the tremendous expansion of government. It was waiting in the wings. There is no such alternative elite now, which is why you see people, the shock and horror with the alt-right. These people are advancing ideas which are radically different to the reigning hegemony. Yeah, so? Well, it's as if we've forgotten that it was possible to have different ideas. Different ideas are a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Lord Keynes famously said, and I'm just paraphrasing, when the facts change, I change my opinions. What do you do? Our elite is in the position where I don't know that it necessarily recognizes facts anymore, but cause and effect has no bearing on what they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
They, I don't know, presumably at university or shortly thereafter, they were implanted with a series of beliefs, the beliefs of the ruling elite. Those are the ideas that they're going to take to them to their death. The elite that we have now has to be replaced because it has failed. It's failed in every respect, and it's failed in ways. We didn't look at the problems of scale.
Oh, there's a lot of things we didn't look at here.
The spiritual dimension, the spiritual emptiness, the existential emptiness of modern Western life. We haven't even touched on that. We were looking at more technical issues.
The religion of climate change.
Well, yeah, the religion of climate change, or the religion of sexual education.
Yeah.
Sexual education was forced on schools based on the argument that it was going to lead to various improved outcomes. All of those outcomes are worse than they were. And what's the response? We need to start teaching 6-year-olds about anal sex. Right. That is literally their response. Mm-hmm. That they need to be replaced, and we need to go back to the traditional situation where you have a ruling elite and you have an alternative elite in the wings, such that if the ruling elite falters, it can be replaced temporarily or permanently. I mean, we are seemingly sleepwalking into disaster now. And I suppose the argument that was made that we were going to end up with a man on a horse has come true. Because Donald Trump is seen as that man on a horse. Not very much thought has been given to the problem of, let's assume Trump wins the election, as I believe that he will. He's going to be faced with a Congress, a Republican Congress, which is occupied by people who disagree with him about almost everything. Now, I suppose he could persuade them or bully them, but there's the possibility that the Congress could say, "No, we're not going to give you what you want. We are going to oppose you every step of the way." I mean, it may be possible now that it is only the rise of Putin-like figures that can bring about reform. Putin is I don't know what you'd call him, an elected dictator of sorts. And that may be the best that we can hope for. I mean, if you'd asked me, 20 or even 10 years ago, what I thought about the possibility of the man on the horse, I would have been horrified by it. Today, I'm thinking, well, it could be worse.
It is worse.
Could be worse. I mean,
no, it is worse. That's the thing.
I mean, for all this talk about Trump being Hitler, Trump is very much not Hitler. Hitler was a man who was motivated by thoughts of revenge. Mm. Trump is not motivated by thoughts of revenge. Hitler was a man who, apart from his success, as a courier during the First World War, had been a failure in his life. And he was largely a failure with in his personal life, with women. Trump has been a success. Trump seems to be, a fairly grounded, happy fellow, as opposed to Hitler. So in terms of the man on the horse, the strong man, I mean, I would argue that, Trump's pretty about the best that we could hope for.
Well, there you go. I think also you tipped your hand in this podcast by putting everyone on notice that we are putting our names into the hat for that alternative elite. That's what the alt-right is here for, folks. We are the alternative.
Well, no, someone is going to have to come up with the ideas. Someone is going to have to explain those ideas, be the middlemen. Mm-hmm. The middlemen that we have now are useless. I mean, if you look at the PR firms, if you look at the media, one would have expected the media, for instance, looking at the collapse, physical and otherwise, of Hillary Clinton, to start getting cautious, or actually to get cautious in a big way about her. Instead, we have seen the opposite, because they're exhausted. They know one thing, and what that thing is that whatever the elite has to say is what we believe in, and we're not pretending to believe in it. We are not being cynical, or we are not merely advancing our careers. It's all we know.
Right. Okay. That's all they know, and that's why they're exhausted. And that's why we've brought this episode 54 of Grace and Steel to you. Again, I'd like to thank our listener, who goes by the Twitter handle Rival Thoughts, for providing us with yet another example of theme music he is offering free of charge to alt-right podcasters as his way of helping the cause. Contact him if you'd like to use one of his ready-made themes, like we've been featuring in our podcasts, or if you need help creating one of your own. So, on behalf of the future elite, the replacements, I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.